We're going to get going. Obviously, as you can tell from the panel up here, we got a lot of I think important information to share with you. So we want to make sure that we are maximizing our time here this morning, talking about Nebraska's new vision for economic development. My name is Belitz. I serve as director of the Nebraska Department of Economic Development. And we have been talking about this topic, looking into this topic for many months, working with the governor and his team, et cetera. Proud to share a little bit of why and a little bit of what we have been talking about as we think about what happens next. I'm going to shorten up my introductory comments a fair amount so we can hear from the people who are on stage here, but I do want to set the scene or set the stage a little bit in terms of, again, why and what. So the why is that we really feel like the marketplace has changed pretty dramatically. We're seeing different factors, either constraints or opportunities that really, we think, demand that we change some of our approaches as a state, and I would say not just state government, but as a state, all of you in this room. Primarily those things are certainly start with people. I think the people constraints, the talent constraints are truly unique historically, and that has driven a lot of changes where, you know, historically what we have incentivized job production, job creation, made perfect sense. But we've heard from some of you in this room, I'm quite sure, that, hey, I'd love to create jobs, I can't find the people. And that's fair. And so we need to adjust according to those market realities. Obviously, we have, at the same time, this extraordinary opportunity, as you've already heard this morning, within the bioeconomy and what Nebraska can do to feed the world and save the planet, as the governor puts it. So really fundamental shifts in the practice of economic development are facing all of us. So let's talk about the people for just a minute. You all know, of course, unemployment in Nebraska has been under 3% for about as long as any of us can remember. But 42 straight months actually is the number that unemployment in the state has been under 3%. The largest class in Nebraska high schools this year will be the senior class. The smallest class in Nebraska high schools this year will be the kindergarten class. You know, those are realities that we have to deal with. So we have to be pretty serious about the work of people attraction and workforce development. At the same time, I don't ever want to leave us with what feels like no hope for the future, and there are absolutely reasons for us to be optimistic. Nebraska is a relative to other states. We are a relatively young state. We have the 4th highest birth rate in the country. We're top 10 in terms of percentage of young people, which some of you may not have guessed, but we are. We are a young state, which means obviously we have hope to change some of those trends. The other one that I'll mention, and Nicole Sedlacek will certainly be able to share a bit as well, is the other really factor that is changing the game a bit in terms of a potential constraint is just future looks at electrical capacity because of the demand growth that we're seeing. Not that we're making less, it's just that the demands continue to grow in that space. And so those two things together are constraints that we're thinking about, and again, need to change the way that we are doing things. Bottom line, the world is changing. The world has changed, the world is changing. If any of you are running a business and you're doing exactly what you did 10 years ago, you're probably doing it wrong, right? Well, it's true in economic development as well. We need to think about what's next. And so coming out of today, what we hope will happen is that all of you will go home and take action, whether it's in a business or a community, whatever it might be, to think about how do we really better address current market realities. And I think we're going to have some awesome information to share with you this morning from the panel to give you some ideas about what you might do. So with that, I want to have some others up here help me set the stage for that as well, and talk about how the world is changing from their perspective. And so the first two speakers this morning will be Nicole Sedlacek, who is the Economic Development Manager for Nebraska Public Power District, and Rachel Kreikemeier, who serves in Gage in Beatrice and Gage County. So ask them to share the perspective from the state level, in Nicole's perspective, what she sees, what her team sees from the prospects and the businesses that are walking in the door, and then at a local level, what does Rachel and her team see? How has the situation on the ground changed or not as we again set the stage for why it's time to think somewhat differently. So, Nicole, the floor is yours. Either way.
I just feel bad I can't see that side of the room, so I just have to see everybody.
That's right.
Sorry, I will kick it. Everybody has to come to the podium now. So, all right. I was just feeling bad for this side of the room, and I couldn't see you. So, good morning. Thank you all for joining this session. It is really an interesting time in our state. It's really an exciting time. But things have really, really changed. So I have been at the utility, Nebraska Public Power District, for about 8.5 years. When I first started there, I was really excited when a 1 megawatt project would come into the utility. And I'll just give you some context for those who don't work in megawatts. Just a round example here. So maybe a 24-hour grocery superstore is 1 megawatt. Maybe a smaller ethanol plant might be on that 5 megawatt side. So just for some context, just want to share that with you. So I would do a happy dance when we got a 1 megawatt load, because that's a really good load. The last couple of years, we have seen projects that are 5, 10, 20, 100, 800 megawatts, 1,200 megawatts. So things have really changed rapidly just in the last couple of years with the passage of the IRA, IIJA legislation. The other aspect of what projects are looking for when they're coming to the state, not only do they need large electrical needs, but they're also looking, for that carbon-free energy. They're maybe having a certain component of it behind the grid. So these projects, not only are they energy intensive, but they're a little bit complex too, with wanting that kind of behind the meter, carbon-free energy. And so it really takes a lot of coordination and effort and really early on engagement with your utilities, your local providers, because to serve a large project, it simply takes time to build out the resources, not only from a transmission side, but what's been so unique at NPPD and from our perspective is we've been historically long on generation. We have produced more power than our footprint has needed. So we've had that excess generation because we've seen the load growth and the uptick and what's coming at us with expected and announced projects. We're needing to build out new resources. We have not built out for the last couple of decades. We met the challenge when the ethanol boom was coming to Nebraska, and we built new resources to serve that load, but we haven't built then because we've seen really kind of stable growth. We were growing maybe about 22 megawatts a year. Now that's one project that we're seeing announced, and so things have rapidly changed, but just the timeline to build out new generation resources really takes time. So it takes time and coordination to work with these projects. So from an electrical standpoint, that's what we've seen has changed. It was like almost a light switch that all of a sudden, Rachel will tell you kind of what they're seeing from the local level, but we've not seen those smaller projects. We're seeing industries, sustainable aviation fuel, ag processing. We're seeing growth in the ethanol industry. We're seeing manufacturing and food processing. So the IRA, IIJA legislation has fueled that, but we're also seeing, due to the limitations with workforce, we're seeing automation happening on the manufacturing floor, and that increases the electrical needs for a business. And so it's all of this. It's really this perfect storm. I want to say that Nebraska is not running out of power. You'll see national headlines that say, we're running out of power. We're growing as we meet the needs of the future. And so on behalf of my fellow generators, LES and OPPD, we're not running out of power. We're all rising to the occasion to meet the need. But it takes time. It takes time to go through the process, the regulations, to build these resources. And so it's an exciting time. Our footprint, we serve 84 of Nebraska's 93 counties. And I keep saying this is like greater Nebraska's time. We're really seeing projects that are great fits for rural Nebraska because they're using ag products in our rural areas, and they're going to be able to bring our college kids back to be able to work in these facilities. So it's really an exciting time. I could go on and on about this, but I need to share my time with Rachel, so I'm going to let her talk about it from the local perspective.
Okay, can everybody hear me? I'm not going to stand up, so you're welcome, rest of your panel. But if you can't see me, I will stand. I'm Rachel Kreikemeier. I'm the economic developer in Beatrice and Gage County. I'm the director of Gage Area Growth Enterprise. So kind of to spin off of what Nicole was talking about in regards to power, I have never thought in my life, let alone would I ever be an economic developer, but two, would I know so much about electrical power and how it works and infrastructure in general. I spend most of my days in meetings with our city administration, our county officials, talking about how can we manage this problem. I pulled the data just for what we are actively trying to recruit in Gage County, and the projects each year from 2020 to current went from 12 megawatts of ask, and that's probably about 15 projects that we submitted on alone, was 12 megawatts of power. To so far in 2024, the ask is 358 megawatts, and that's 3 projects. So that the ask is there, and from the local perspective, we are trying to figure out how do we help incentivize these companies? How do we help build out some of this infrastructure to get that capacity to meet the demand? Not only that, because that's just business and industry recruitment. We have to work on housing, childcare, workforce development, all of those other things, plus support our existing businesses. We have manufacturers expanding their manufacturing plants by 80,000 square feet of space right now. There's additional demand and ask that we aren't ready for either. So it's a really big plug and play, and I'm sure that every single one of you in the room is facing those same exact challenges. We're trying to get new housing subdivisions off the ground, redevelop our downtown. We're very excited about a massive highway reroute that we've got going in our downtown. We were just awarded a $21 million grant for the RAISE program, so we're very excited about that and what that can do for our downtown. When it comes to power, we're a little bit different than probably most communities or counties throughout the state. Beatrice is actually its own municipal power provider. So we have many partnerships and collaborations with NPPD and Norris Public Power District when it comes to how do we look at building out this infrastructure, who is the provider, and kind of building out those networks from there. So we have multiple partnerships and collaborate quite a bit. So we've got many players coming in and trying to figure out how we can solve that power problem. How do we get it there, and how do we continue to grow to meet that demand? I might have given you some time back.
Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, no, you didn't. Thank you, Nicole, Rachel, appreciate that. It really does, I think, do a great job of setting the scene that, yes, we have these constraints around people or power, others maybe, but the fact is it's not because we've stopped doing anything, it's not because we've stopped working, it's because the opportunity continues to grow faster than we can keep up with, and that's not the worst problem in the world, right? Better to have more opportunity than not enough, and that's exactly where we're at. And so in that environment, our approach, generally speaking, at the state of Nebraska, is going to be moving toward a very strategic and targeted approach in terms of incentives, recruitment, all those things. And then people attraction is job one. And that's now what we will spend the rest of our time together talking about here today. So on the people attraction side of things, We have been given the opportunity and the responsibility at the Department of Economic Development to execute on a $5 million investment that the legislature approved in the governor's budget to continue working forward on our Good Life is Calling campaign. So it is not by any means just a marketing, and I don't mean to undersell marketing, but marketing alone is not enough. It's a marketing and recruiting effort to move people to Nebraska and retain those people in Nebraska. We are getting very close to launching that. There's another breakout today talking about that in detail, so I won't do that here. If you want to catch that, you can. But we are serious about a strategic and targeted approach to moving people to Nebraska and retaining more Nebraskans like those young people that have been referred to in the main sessions a couple times already. So there is also in that space, I want to say, there is real reason for hope there as well. We know that this generation, Centennials, Gen Z, whatever you want to call them, is probably the most receptive to a message of staying in places like Nebraska compared to any of the preceding 2, 3, 4 generations. They want to live in places like Nebraska. Not all of them, obviously, but a strong majority. And we have the data to back that up. We have data from Nebraska, where high school students say a majority of them want to stay in their hometown or somewhere like it. They don't see a negative stigma related to coming back home, which some of us in this room would have to admit we did feel when we were that age. We have real opportunity in Nebraska, and that's backed up by national data as well. It says this generation is interested in small places or smaller places than their predecessors. We have tremendous opportunity with this next generation. But we've got to take advantage of that, right? So we have to be intentional about taking advantage. And we have a wonderful example to share with you today in what Amy is going to share. So Amy Steffen is Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Fiserv. And they've really been a company in Nebraska that's been executing on this opportunity here for a while. And we've asked her to share what they have done at Fiserv as an example of a model that can be successful, whether it's a community or business, in accomplishing those people attraction goals. So, Amy?
All right, good morning, everyone. I thought I might start with a personal story about what brought me here today. At age 2, I moved from Pennsylvania to Nebraska. I don't remember much about that car ride, but Mom told me I was pretty excited the whole time just to get here. So why do you move from Pennsylvania to Nebraska? My dad was a mechanical engineer. He built combines. What a better place to do that than in the Corn Belts. My mom was a human resources professional, and so I thank her today for my role as a senior VP of HR at Fiserv. My folks would tell you that moving to Nebraska was not part of their life plan, but they would also tell you some 50 years later, it was the best decision that they ever made. Fast forward a few years through my childhood, I had the chance to grow up in Lexington, Nebraska and Grand Island, Nebraska. I grew up with 4-H, and I learned about detasseling corn in the summer heat. I spent every summer at the state fair, and there's still a few purple ribbons running around in my treasure chest from awards won. When it came time for college, the decision was pretty easy. I'm staying in Nebraska, and I chose Hastings College. After graduation, I explored other parts of the U.S., but my heart always brought me home, here to Nebraska. I joined First Data, now Fiserv, in the spring of 1998, right ahead of Y2K when we weren't sure if the lights were going to come on January 1st. My Fiserv career, now spanning more than 26 years, yes, I started there when I was 2, have been nothing but wonderful. And they've taken me many places. But again, I've always come home to Nebraska. And today I'm honored to sit here with you and represent our growing business, a Fortune magazine World's Most Admired Company, in the place where it all began in 1971, right here in Nebraska. Fiserv, for those of you who may not be familiar with us, is a Fortune 500 company and a global leader in the payments and financial technology space. Okay, Amy, that's really fancy. What does that mean? Think about your banks, the core platforms that they run on. That is part of Fiserv. The credit card that is in your wallet, that is part of Fiserv. Your electronic tax return that you filed this year, processed as part of Fiserv. We power the global economy through small and middle-sized merchants in our small communities and our big box retailers in our large communities. We also have a point of sale system called Clover. If you're ever out in the community with me, you'll see me leading over every merchant's countertop to see if you're running on Clover, providing a point of sale device from end to end to power those businesses. In an organization, though, of nearly 44,000 people around the globe, we are proud to call Nebraska home. This is our primary strategic location and the heart of our program, lying deep in our commitment to showcasing the very best that Nebraska has to offer. Like other Nebraska businesses, our hiring needs and our necessity to attract and retain talent is always top of mind for me as an HR professional. And much like my parents all those years ago, Nebraska can feel like a tough sell for people considering relocation. I think I've heard it all over the years. You live where? Do you really have an airport? And how much does it snow? In this constant pursuit of ours to seek and attract talent through strategic initiatives, we looked at a recent program called the Fiserv Employee Experience. We had the privilege of hosting 124 Fiserv employees from around the world, asking them to relocate to the great state of Nebraska. During a 2-day immersion experience in our state, our colleagues were not just visitors, but members of our community, eager to learn, engage, and experience the essence of the good life. Each employee, and the plus one of their choice, and in some cases their kiddos, were welcomed here. As they arrived at our airports, their first stop was their hotel, where they were greeted with a welcome note from our senior leaders and a gift box of Nebraska goodies, including things like Nebraska popcorn, Nebraska koozies, and Nebraska cookies. All things from local businesses would help them connect with the good life. They were welcomed at our facilities for a chance to interact with senior leaders, to learn about our communities that we live in, and to ask questions about how and why we are in Nebraska. We had our local universities and school systems present to answer their questions. We invited tax accountants to talk about the financial implications of moving to Nebraska. We invited volunteer organizations to come speak about ways to get involved in the communities. And for each group, we did a bus tour of the local community, hitting our famous landmarks, our local historical treasures, and we dined at some of the favorite restaurants in town. At the end of those sessions, each individual had a chance to meet with a local real estate agent for a personalized tour that would meet their housing needs as they continued forward in their journey. We even played a little bit of Nebraska trivia and awarded some Fiserv tchotchkes as part of the weekends. This immersive opportunity to experience the communities we live in and work in and call home made the thought of moving to Nebraska just a little less scary and a lot more exciting. And our work hasn't stopped there. We have actively engaged with the University of Nebraska at Omaha for recruiting and building out our talent pipeline. We have a robust intern and analyst program, and we hire vets because we believe in giving back to those who gave for us. Last year, I had the privilege of hiring 103 military or military spouses in a 4-week period. They're all still with the team. With a focus on youth, we have launched a program called Fiserv Future Techies, providing opportunities for young peoples in grades 4 through 6 to come in and gain exposure to STEM technology in the business place. So when you look back at Fiserv, with deep roots in our Nebraska community since 1971, we stand as a testament to our enduring commitment to this state. With 5,000 associates here in the state of Nebraska alone, our associates are contributing to the vibrant culture of innovation and excellence that's here. We have a deep woven fabric to Nebraska, and we want to be an integral part of the economic vitality and growth of our communities as we go forward. The employee experience program that I shared with you not only serves as a gateway for attracting talent to our state, but reflects our ongoing dedication to helping our communities and state thrive. We will continue to foster those connections, facilitate engagement with our local leaders, and provide opportunities for our people to experience the diversity and warmth that I've known since I arrived here as a young girl at the age of 2. We also know that we're not merely attracting talent to our state, but we are nurturing a community of individuals who will help us to embrace values, contribute to our growth, and embody the spirit of a Cornhusker. I I cheered on the Cornhuskers even though I came from Hastings. It's an honor to inspire and engage and empower those who choose to call Nebraska home, and we are very excited as an employer to be part of the good life.
Thank you, Amy. Do you, and I know we didn't prep for this question, but just generally speaking, do you have a sense of how successful those events were in terms of moving people to Nebraska and keeping them here since?
120 plus relocated to Nebraska, and all are still here.
That is the right answer. Yeah. So we thought it was really important to share kind of an on-the-ground local story, a business story, as we think about the people attraction or workforce development piece, because that is absolutely the way we envision executing on the Good Life is Calling campaign. That investment from the state is not something that DED is going to make independently or on our own. The reality is anyone that moves to Nebraska is not moving to a generic place called Nebraska. They're moving to a community, they're moving to a job, they're moving to a company. All of those things are more important, frankly, than the state side of that. And so what we hope is that people in this room will walk out of here today inspired to become a partner, whether it's an event like that or several other opportunities that will give you to be a part of that effort to move people and retain people in Nebraska. And Kyle Gilster standing in the back of the room, I'm going to take this opportunity to plant a seed there as well, because Kyle just called, I don't know what, 3, 4, 5 months ago, something like that, and said, hey, you know what? I know a lot of people out here in DC or the eastern side of the country that would love to come home to Nebraska if they found the right opportunity. Well, we're going to take advantage of that offer from Kyle. We're going to talk about how do we connect Nebraska with those people that might want to come home. I would challenge all of you to do that same thing. If you know people somewhere else that ought to be here, let's go talk to them. Just like those 2 young people last night. We all have networks around the country. Let's move them home to Nebraska. We all have a responsibility to help us take advantage of this opportunity. So that's one big bucket of our new approach, our new vision, and that is people attraction or workforce development. The other big bucket is really being focused, being targeted and strategic in our efforts. And there's 2 elements of that we'll share with you today. Here in a minute, Cobus is going to talk about an effort that he and Cheryl Hyatt on our team built out to connect with Nebraska employers and really help them. But first we're going to talk about what has obviously been a theme throughout, and that is the bioeconomy or plant-based production, however you want to phrase that. And our next 3 speakers are going to share the scope of that opportunity. And we thought that was important for all of you because we want you to understand that in no way are we targeting this as exclusionary of anything else. It's just that it is such a huge opportunity. And Nicole sort of talked to that a little bit, as did Rachel, in terms of what they're seeing on the ground. But what may happen for Nebraska within this space is pretty extraordinary. And so we have 3 speakers that can speak to what they're seeing every day on the ground here in Nebraska and around the world, actually. And so we're going to start with Sarah Jelken. She is VP and Industrial Segment Leader for Cargill Starches, Sweeteners, and Texturizers. I don't get to work with texturizers. That's a good word. And really has become not just a colleague, but a friend, I think, to Nebraska and to us at DED. And so obviously all of you know that what's happening with Cargill and the partnership around Blair is extraordinary. And so we wanted Sarah to share a little bit of that story. So the floor is yours.
I'm going to follow Nicole's footsteps and jump up a little bit. And actually, I think if it's all right, Casey, Kyle and I might pass it back and forth just because Novonesis and Cargill share a campus in Nebraska. And so we also thought, as we think about the bioeconomy, it might be nice to kind of pass it back and forth and have a little bit of a dialogue about what that looks and feels like in practice and what we've been doing at the site together. So as Casey, and I feel like I'm going to get a pitch to move here pretty soon, and I'm not against it. I'm not against it. I'm actually from Kansas originally, and so this would be a lot closer to home for me, so that would be pretty exciting. As Casey said, my name's Sarah Jelken, and I work for Cargill, a global food and ag company. I'm sure many of you are familiar with because we have a lot of business across the state, and the state is very, very important to Cargill. One of the things that I want to talk a little bit about today, and it's funny because when I was listening to Rachel say that she never thought she'd know that much about watts or power, I never thought I would know all the things you could do with corn. There is so much that you can do with corn and soybeans too. I mean, I'm not going to be, but I do, I'm on the leadership team of our business that deals with corn at Cargill. And so corn is my area of expertise, and it is amazing. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And so to do that, there is one interactive portion of this program right now where I'm going to ask you a question. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to take us all on a little bit of a field trip here. So I came in from Minneapolis today to talk to everyone, and so I'm gonna ask you a question, and so bear with me. I want you to think through these things and then tell me what they have in common. So we're gonna take a field trip. It's summer, okay? Summer's great driving season, right? Does everyone love road trips in the summer? Yes? Okay, so we're gonna get in a car together. We're gonna leave from Omaha, okay? So we're getting in a car, we're going from Omaha. We're gonna fuel up our vehicle, and we're gonna grab a body armor from the gas station. If you've seen those drinks, the body armor, everyone familiar with those? Pretty good, right? Body armor zero. Let's go with the body. Have you seen those new launches, the zeros? Okay, there's also body armor light, but you're gonna grab one of those, you're gonna fuel up your car. Okay, we're gonna drive to Minneapolis together, because I came down here, now you're going up there to see me. We're gonna take in a Twins game. And when we go to the Twins game, we're gonna have nachos, and we're gonna have some beer, okay? Couple beers, not too many though. We've got to be safe, but we're gonna have a couple beers. And then spend the night, all the things, come back. On the way back, you're gonna grab a Coca-Cola, gonna get back to Omaha, and then we're gonna have a great steak dinner. Now, my question for all of you is, as you think about those events, can you tell me what they all might have in common as you think about that? Corn, yes. Ding, ding. What even more specifically? All these answers are right, but what I will tell you is they all literally have things that were made from corn in Blair, Nebraska. And let me tell you a little at the Cargill biorefining campus, and I'll tell you a little bit more. So we fueled up our car, which has ethanol, right, which actually uses enzymes that Novonesis makes at that facility, as well as the ethanol that Cargill makes there using the enzymes that Novonesis makes. You also bought that body armor, which has a non-caloric sweetener that's fermented from corn right there in the Blair campus. That's another plant. So body armor, patronize it. It has corn from Nebraska in the body armor lights. So make sure you buy it. And then you drove up, right? So you're going to the Twins game. Twins has a zero waste ecosystem at their ballpark. And those, first of all, the corn chips are fried in corn oil, which is produced in Blair. So oil from the corn plant, we process it and crush it right there in Blair, Nebraska, and have corn oil that the corn chips are produced or fried in. And then the trays for the nachos and the cups that the beers are in are actually made from polylactic acid, which NatureWorks makes from corn at the Blair plant, and they're fully compostable. So the trays that you get the nacho chips and cheese in, and the cup that you're drinking the beer out of, compostable, all made fermented from corn right in Blair, Nebraska, from corn grown in Nebraska. That's amazing. You get the Coca-Cola, high fructose corn syrup, love it or hate it. It makes Coke taste delicious, I'm just gonna say. You're drinking that on the way back, right, with corn from Nebraska. And when you get back, you have that steak dinner, which is cattle that were fed from Sweet Bran, coming from the co-products out of that Blair plant. So I just wanted to give you a feel. Just when you look at, that's one example, and we have those plants. I mean, Cargill isn't the only one, right? But I wanted to give you a feel just right there when you think about that one facility, all the different pieces that touch your everyday life and what corn can go into. Now, if you go even further, and we could talk about this for more and more, but I won't get into it here, you get into stuff like in our neighbors in Iowa at one of our plants, we're starting up later this year, they'll be making yoga pants material that comes from corn. Febreze, if you buy that, the molecules that help hold it together come from corn. And so really, as you think about this bioeconomy and what it is, a lot of people think about fuel, but it's in things like Febreze. It's really making chemicals instead of the carbon below the ground, like the governor said. It's taking that from above, from the plants. So it's really exciting. So Blair, Nebraska, founded in 1993. That's when it was started. About 940 people on the campus, 650 acres, over 12 products, 5 companies, 500 trucks of corn a day is what we dump. And one of our key partners there is Novonesis. I'm gonna pass it over to Kyle, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about what the overall size of the economy is and really what that can mean for Nebraska.
Great, thank you. Appreciate it. And I'm going to sit, and for those on this side of the room, you're welcome. You don't have to see this. That's good. Personal introduction real fast. My name is Kyle Nixon. I'm a lifelong Nebraska. I grew up in Laurel, Nebraska, northeast, a little small town. Went to the University of Nebraska in Lincoln, and I started working for UPS while I was in college, loading trucks and doing the early morning thing. I worked for UPS for about 20 years. I drove the brown trucks, I drove over-the-road trucks, and then I was supervisor manager, division manager at UPS. And then in 2011, I decided to make a change because a company called Novozymes was coming to Nebraska, and they wanted a supply chain. A lot of people ask me, how do you go from packages to enzyme? And they needed a supply chain manager, so that was the way that I got to Novozymes. Novozymes then became Novonesis actually just this year. We combined with a company called Christian Hansen. Novozymes is a Danish company. Christian Hansen is also a Danish company, and we've now combined with them. Christian Hansen side produces it's a food ingredient company, and so we became Novonesis through that. Novonesis now, from a Blair standpoint, started as Novozymes in 2011. We built our initial investment in Blair was roughly $320 million. And Novozymes produces enzymes as a Novonesis company now with the food additives and things like that. We produce a lot of different we produce enzyme for a lot of different products. Detergents, food and beverage. Our primary build in Blair was for ethanol. So we started the plant, $300 and some million. Initially, when we brought in, when we got the plant started, we were bringing enzyme in from our plants in North Carolina, from our plants in Denmark. It's a Danish company as well. Bringing enzyme in and producing product that then goes out to ethanol plants. As a company, especially in Blair, and we have a great partnership with Cargill, and we're very grateful for that. There were a lot of different places that Novozymes could have built this, and it was a worldwide. I've talked about this on some other panels. Because it's a Danish company, and we have plants in China, we have plants in India, we have plant in South America. Currently, I am the supply chain manager for North and South America. Previously, I was the general manager for the site in Blair. But initially, we brought in the enzyme and we were producing, and as we brought it in, we started building the plant in 2011, and that's kind of when I came on. Since then, we've never stopped construction. We've continued to produce. Right now, we started with about 60 employees. Right now, we're at about 170 employees. We started off producing the enzyme fermentation recovery process. We then moved to expand our fermentation back in 2017. And roughly 2 years ago, we started a project, a $320 million project that we just finished up to produce a plant-based protein. So as a site, we're also expanding what we'll produce. It's not just about ethanol there anymore. It's about, just as Sarah talked about, a lot of different industries that have capabilities. I would tell you that just going back to what we talked about from being from Nebraska, most Danish people, when we first came to Nebraska, our Danish headquarters, where is Nebraska? Why would we want to go to Nebraska? What's going on in Nebraska? And I think they kind of questioned about why we were going to build something here. I can tell you now, Blair, when we talk about projects that are going to happen at Novozymes, whether they be any capacity that we need, or Novonesis, it's hard for me to get used to saying that. When we talk about projects anywhere in, so we look at it from a capacity standpoint. So from a global standpoint, we need capacity somewhere. And when we talk about that at our corporate level in Copenhagen, we say, okay, where's the best way? Where is it that we could build that? We could build that in China, we could build that in India, we could build that in South America, we could build that in North America. Where is it? With UPS, it was a little bit different for me. As a division manager, when we built the new building, UPS said, we're gonna put it there. They hand me a key and I went and ran it, or I went and ran it. At Novozymes, it is me going to Copenhagen and saying, this is why I think we should build this in Blair. And we've done that so much over the last 13 years that now I don't have to go there and say that anymore. The first thing that they say is, can we build that in Blair? Is it possible for us to be able to do that? The site itself, Again, we're sitting at roughly $700 million in investment there. I can tell you it's set up to be 5 times bigger than it is. We could expand our fermentation, we could expand recovery, we could expand in a lot of different areas, our utilities. We've actually set it up so we could mirror all of our utility buildings. Obviously working with Cargill in that aspect to make sure that we have the resources, obviously working with OPPD and electric. So that is a good feeling for me because the first thing that they say is, how do we build this in Blair? I would tell you from a Nebraska standpoint, I love the state. Obviously, I have not left. I've been here.
That's questionable.
Well, yeah, I know. I travel a lot now. So as the general manager, I did a lot of these panels, and I was able to come to a lot of meetings. And as the supply chain director now, I'm traveling a lot. And so I don't get a chance to be involved in some of these as much as I would like to. But I'm very happy to be back. When I first got this role, though, I was the GM in Blair for 5 years. When I first got this role, this role's always been based out of our plant in Raleigh, North Carolina. So initially when they said, we want you to take this role, you need to move to Raleigh, and I said, there is absolutely no way I am leaving Nebraska. There is no way. So if that means that I need to leave and go do something else, then that's what I'm going to do, but I'm not leaving Nebraska. Thankfully, Novozymes said, yeah, you should stay in Nebraska, that's fine, and you can do what you need to do. So I'm here, I'm happy to be here. I'm gonna turn it back over to Sarah, and she's gonna talk a little bit more about what we see from a future from a campus standpoint, and then I think I'll talk more about specifically with Novonesis.
Yes, we have a couple more minutes,
Couple
right?
more,
Okay,
couple more, okay.
All right, perfect. Maybe I'll stay seated for now. I think, thank you so much, and I just can't emphasize enough the concept of this partnership. And you hear, Kyle and I talking about it, and he talked about OPPD, and we, just even our relationship with Cobus, and just there is so much of an ecosystem that goes into these, and thinking energy is such an important thing in that carbon intensity, and even with our farmer partners on what renewable agriculture coming in, when you look at the power structure, when you look at housing, so much of what we have to do, looking at talent coming in. And it is interesting because I remember a decade ago, automation scared everyone. You're gonna take jobs if automation comes into facilities, and it was really kind of a controversial subject. And the funny part is we found now that so many people in some of the newer incoming generations actually don't want to work nights and weekends. It is no longer attractive, and they're looking for roles where they don't have to work night shift, they don't have to work weekends. And so actually now we're seeing automation become a very attractive element where you can have more skilled roles, less people that maybe need to work nights and weekends, more jobs on day shift, which are about fine-tuning some of that and running more of it in an automatic way in those evenings and other times. And so it's really had an interesting value prop. And so I think what Casey said about how you have to do things differently now than how you did 10 years ago really resonates with us. So couple numbers I just want to throw out there. The U.S., the Department of Science and Technology says $950 billion is the size of the bioeconomy in the United States of America. 400 billion of that is direct. The rest of it is kind of tangential jobs as a part of that. And I think estimates are the biomanufacturing part of it, so materials and things, not necessarily fuel part of it, estimated to be 200 billion of that in the next 5 to 7 years or so. So huge opportunity when you think about that. And as we talked about, Nebraska's really set up to take advantage of this because you have the feedstock, which is critical because people want to be near the feedstock. It is not very economical to ship corn by truck and rail all the places. You want to have that stream. That's exactly why Novonesis is in Nebraska and not putting that, in New York City, for example. You want to have it near the raw material. But the other thing is when you process the grain, you create so many co-products. The other really important thing is having a use for that, and that's animal feed. And so there really is this circular kind of solution that you have. And so Nebraska having a really active feed market and all the animal feed and the raw material is huge and a benefit. So Nebraska is really poised to have a huge role in this. You already do. I mean, you have us, you have our other players in the industry have these mills and do these things like this, but you are set up very well to capture a huge part of this economy. So I'll just say, and I'll pass it back over to Kyle to talk a little bit about growth, but my final word on that to you would be a challenge to say, think about in your everyday what you can do to be an impact of that. as you talk about careers and things like that, talk about agriculture, but talk about biomanufacturing. I think people really don't, sometimes they think it's only about biofuel. So do your part in kind of helping raise awareness about other cool things about that and the roles that are out there. Raise your hand about this like low carbon and the power and all the different things that we need for these ecosystems, because there is a lot of value out there for Nebraskans by having these kind of campuses. It generates wealth, and I think Nebraska deserves to have more than their fair share of that piece of the $950 billion. So.
Yep, and I'll wrap up very quickly. I agree with everything that you said, and I think that from a standpoint specifically for Novonesis, we are talking about these expansions. We're just having a conversation in the back about some of the expansions that we're looking at. But going back to what is the primary concern, and that is the people. That is the people. And the automation has definitely come into play for us, which is very good. But from a people standpoint, we need to make sure that we are recruiting people in. I talked about having to go to Denmark and pitch Blair as a project place. That was one of the first things that they have always said, and that's one of the things they continue to say. We can build this. We can build a $300 million building. How are you going to get employees to run it? And that's where we take a look at options like automation and so on and so forth. So with that being said, Novonesis is hiring in Blair, so I'll throw out some numbers.
So is Cargill.
$25 an hour,
So is
full
Cargill.
benefits, 9% 401k match. Thank you very much.
Wait a minute.
That went off the rails in a hurry.
It's not gonna get any better.
Well done. Yeah, that's true. So you hear the potential, right? 5 times is what just Novonesis could grow on that campus alone, right? You hear that potential. The other side of it that Rob Owen is going to share, representing Bio Nebraska. You know, Rob spends a lot of his time working with those that are just starting up, and the people who are going to be in those spots, et cetera. So a great perspective to add to what Cargill and Novonesis are doing. So Rob, the floor is yours.
Yeah, just a couple personal items here. One, I'm Danish.
Hey, there we go.
2, I used to kind of run around with Kyle out in Washington, D.C. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska, moved out to D.C., lived there for 13 years, decided to come back to Nebraska. My wife and I met my wife out there. She's from Nebraska. It took us some time to come back to Nebraska and find jobs. So you had 2 well-educated folks, I think, who came back, and it was hard. So as someone said, if you find someone who's educated and smart, you can teach them something. So just use some flexibility. If there are people from Nebraska who want to come back, if Kyle sends them back, and they may not be an accountant or marketing or whatever, but they're well-educated, hire them and teach them. So that's my ploy on that one. All right, so Bio Nebraska, we're a trade association that supports, promotes, and grows biosciences in Nebraska. We have about 130 member organizations coming from animal health, human health, biomanufacturing, ag, renewable fuels. We have it all. In fact, I have members here: Cargill, Novonesis, NPPD, OPPD, Ethanol Board, DED. They're all members because it's a big ecosystem. And so, looking at what we can do to help as we move this bioeconomy along, I have 2 examples of companies that are not good for Nebraska, but then what we're trying to do to fix that. These are 2 startups, Nebraska companies. They are looking for fermentation workforce and expertise and capacity to do pilot lots. And we're talking fermentation here. Fermentation's everywhere. Beer, animal vaccines, biomanufacturing, ethanol, fermentation's everywhere. These 2 startup companies, one had to look to Iowa State and University of Iowa to find a workforce that has the expertise in fermentation and also capacity to be doing pilot lots. Another company had to go to Wisconsin, to Madison, to find workforce with fermentation and capacity. These are 2 Nebraska companies that are looking outside the state. So if we want to grow a bioeconomy and make Nebraska the bioeconomy state, we need to start doing something differently here. We have everything here. We have the feedstock, we have cheap power, we have available water. It's all here except the workforce. So last year, Bio Nebraska, along with Invest Nebraska and Southeast Community College, launched the Fermentation Collaborative. And this is really a kind of a 3-component program. And it's not going to fix things overnight, but we're going to start addressing it. And first, it is bringing those industry sectors in the bio world together with academic institutions, the 2-year, 4-year, to sit down and talk about industry's needs, what is currently being offered by those institutions to teach bioprocessing, fermentation, biomanufacturing, to open that dialogue up to see what we can get going. Because we need the 2-year degrees, we need the 4-year degrees, we need the continuing education, we need everything. So we've started that process, and there's been some really good dialogue going on. It's going to take resources on the academic institution side, and it can't all fall within them. Industry also has to be willing to put those resources in, and that's internships, scholarships, teaching and such. So we've started that process. The second component of the fermentation collaborative is awareness. You're not going to have a 17, 18, or 19-year-old show up and say, I want to be a fermentation scientist or a bioprocessing engineer. So we need to work on that message getting into the junior highs and high schools about, one, what companies are here, what those jobs are that are here, and really at some point about wages. I believe the latest report I saw is the average salary for the bio jobs in Nebraska is roughly $82,000 a year. And if you compare that to the state private sector wage of like $50,000 or $52,000, bio companies are creating high quality, high wage jobs. So we need to factor that in. So it's an awareness campaign. And then third, it's really building that startup entrepreneurship ecosystem where these smaller companies can maybe have mentorships, but really the capacity to do those pilot lots so they can do their work here in the state, and then instead of moving off to another state, because if they move out, they may never come back. I mean, if they're looking at Illinois or Iowa or Minnesota, Wisconsin, they have corn, they have feedstock, maybe not as much as Nebraska, but they have it there.
Our corn's better.
Yes. So, I mean, that's what we're kind of doing as a fermentation collaborative. And again, it's trying to figure out how do we get a workforce, educate, train a workforce here to provide employees for Novonesis, Cargill, but also for those startup companies in this burgeoning bioeconomy that we have here. So again, it's not an overnight fix, but I think when we look at fermentation, it's not out of the question that Nebraska should be the fermentation state. I mean, I'm a graduate of University of Nebraska-Lincoln. I don't know why University of Nebraska is not the fermentation university. Like, why not? We have everything here. Great opportunity to recruit, keep kids here, but also recruit students from across the world to come to the heartland where biomanufacturing is here and teach fermentation scientists. So that's my thing. I know it's going to take a lot of money and all that to do, but it's something that we need to do. If the governor wants this state to be the bioeconomy state, we need to start looking at what industry needs in that workforce and recruiting, but more than likely training them here in the state and moving on. So I think it's, you know, Kyle brought up fermentation, Sarah brought up fermentation. It's a big deal. And with that, if I can plug this, Casey, in September, there's a new event coming to Omaha called Bio Innovations Midwest. And this is an opportunity to showcase the Midwest as the area of the U.S. for biomanufacturing, and it's an opportunity to really talk about commercialization. You know, how do we get from that startup out of there to real, you know, products that are, economical, but they're also quality-wise. So if you're interested in that, come talk to me afterwards. I mean, it's a neat deal. I give a lot of credit to the Nebraska Department of Economic Development for talking to the owners of this event to come to. This is their first event in the United States, and they chose Omaha, Nebraska, because they know what is here and what the possibilities are. So it's a big deal as we continue to move on this bioeconomy forward. So, and on top of that, if you want to become a member of Bio Nebraska, please come talk to me afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate it. So I hope you get a sense of why we see the potential that we see in that bioeconomy from what you've heard from these three. So that's clearly going to be one of our strategic and targeted buckets. The other is continuing to invest in Nebraska companies already here, already investing in our state. How do we help them grow first? And Cobus Block and Cheryl Hyatt on our team put together a really interesting initiative along those lines that I've asked Cobus to talk about a little bit, just as an example of what, again, I hope all of you go home and think about doing as well. So, Cobus, if you would.
Yeah, so my name is Cobus Block. I lead our business recruitment and international teams for the Department of Economic Development. And as Casey alluded to, there's a lot of excitement around the bioeconomy, but there's also a variety of other industries in the state of Nebraska that are really strong. And specifically, what we wanted to look at was our manufacturing industry. And obviously, as was alluded to earlier, there's combine manufacturers here in the state, pivot machinery manufacturers, all sorts of equipment manufacturers that have a long history in the state, are very valued members of their local communities, and do a lot to help grow the economy here. So one of the things that we were challenged with is what can we do in terms of recruitment strategy, so not just helping those companies to expand on their own, but what can we do in order to target recruitment of companies into the state that can help also foster a better economy, a better ecosystem for those manufacturers here in Nebraska. So with the help of Cheryl Hyatt, who leads our field staff team across the state, we went out and identified 42 manufacturers, Nebraska-based, Nebraska-owned manufacturers, and had conversations with them face-to-face in their plants to talk about where are supply chain issues that they see, where are their problems in terms of potential partners, potential suppliers, etc., where maybe they're having a hard time getting a part from a local supplier. They have to go out of country, they have to go out of state, they have to partner with somebody outside of the state of Nebraska, and can we use that information to identify targets for us to go out and talk to those companies about why they should maybe consider coming to Nebraska. So over the course of the first part of the year, we went out and met with all of those companies, and then we started looking at common themes across what we got back from those conversations, and identifying either specific companies or areas where we can try and target our efforts. And so after that, my team has been working on using that information to go out and look at manufacturers or companies that fit into those missing pieces across the United States, and figuring out who those might be to kind of provide us a good target list, and then trying to identify what the best way to approach those companies and how to start conversations with companies across the U.S. So we're past the part where we've talked to Nebraska companies, we've identified some key companies that we want to start conversations with, and identified as well some low-hanging fruit in terms of events or methods of getting introductions, of starting those kind of conversations. And so now we're starting to reach out to companies and hopefully to start those conversations again to see if we can help bring in those missing pieces that we need in the state of Nebraska.
Such a great initiative to take the resources, the assets we already have, and continue to leverage them. So certainly thanks to Cobus and Cheryl for the innovative thinking to do that. So what you've heard, I hope, is sort of an understanding of how the game has changed on the ground in economic development, the opportunity that we have to attract people home, the opportunity that we have in the bioeconomy to really grow in exponential ways, and our focus on existing Nebraska companies. So we're trying to put all of that into what is from a Department of Economic Development perspective, specifically, a new vision for economic development in the state. So since you showed up, you get a little sneak peek of what that's going to look like. We've been working with the governor over the last few months on the things that he wants to see in that plan, going back and forth, and we're getting closer to a point where we've nailed down the details of what he will propose, most likely in the next session of the unicameral. And so I want to first have the team that's been working on that stand up so everybody can see them. So Joe Fox is the Deputy Director, Department of Economic Development, over Business Development Programs. Dave Dearmont, if you would stand as well, Dave, is our Chief Economist, Senior Policy Advisor, and then Cobus and I. So the challenge I'm going to give all of you in the room is, if you want input on what economic development ought to look like from a state perspective, catch Dave, catch Joe, catch Cobus before you leave the room and give them your input. Now is the time for your voice to be heard. And I'll tell you this, also what I've learned in the last couple months of doing this process, you wouldn't know it looking at him, but Dave Dearmont is our wild child. If you got something out of the box, he's your guy. Talk to him. Whew, he's got some thoughts. So what that's going to look like, generally speaking, is a lot of what you've heard here today. We are going to try to evolve incentives and recruitment efforts that reflect the reality of the people attraction, the people constraints that Rob was talking about, So we're going to propose that there be an enhancement in what we probably call an efficiency tier, where companies are incentivized to make those technological investments that help create productivity, that help create more output, grow the state's GDP, but don't necessarily result in new jobs. And that, for any of you that have been in the game a long time, is a pretty fundamental shift. It has been about job creation for a very long time. But as I said earlier, many of you in the room, Lisa, have rightfully said, hey, we got folks that like to create jobs, but we got to find the people first, and that's a valid complaint. So enhancing the opportunity for companies to grow their business while maintaining but not necessarily growing their job base is going to be one of those themes in what we put forward. Certainly being targeted, I think that's clear. Targeted in terms of industry, targeted in terms of supporting existing Nebraska companies. We're going to try to build some things into the incentive package that fits that bill as well. Flexible, and I think that goes to, you know, you've heard it throughout this, how quickly things have changed. You know, we didn't, it hasn't been very long when we passed the last package. Imagine Nebraska hasn't been very long ago, and yet the world is vastly different in this space than it was then. So we need some flexibility built into that. And then specifically to that people attraction or workforce development bucket, certainly we will look to incentivize companies to make those investments in the things that matter, like housing, like childcare, like training, recruitment, relocation. All those things are inherent in what we're thinking about within this proposal as well. And then you've clearly heard the governor say, as he did already here, this givers versus takers narrative, and that matters as well in an environment where we have an opportunity as a state to see this extraordinary growth that's been outlined here. It gives us the opportunity to be strategic in who we're going after and the kinds of companies and partners that we want to work with. And so thinking about how that looks is a little trickier, frankly, within state policy. But that narrative of we're looking for people who want to come here and be partners with Nebraska, that's certainly going to be a part of what we're thinking about as well. So it will look different. There's no question about that. I think it's appropriate that it does. The market is demanding that it does. And if you want to have a voice in that, again, catch Dave, catch Joe, catch Cobus before you leave the room and tell them the things you would like to see in that, because we want to hear from all of you who are going to be the partners on the ground doing the work. With that, I think we did good, panel. Doggone, we got 10 minutes for questions. Look at that. Happy to take any questions for any of the panelists or Dave or Joe who you have heard from today about any of the opportunities or the direction that we are headed. Whether comments or questions, we're certainly happy to hear them. So, anyone? Yeah, we can.
Hi, everyone. On the panel, most of you, if not all of you, are corporately associated. I had a graduating senior a couple of years ago. How much involvement do you have in the education and the recruitment of high school kids? How many of those kids know what you're doing, that they want to come and work for you?
That's great. Yeah.
Most of these kids, I was a single mom, and so my kid never knew really what I was doing until I got home and I was tired. And I cooked supper and we went to bed and we did the things. How much are we engaging the schools in our communities to show them what's out there?
I can just tell you from a Novonesis standpoint, and again in a different role, I don't have the opportunity that I had as the general manager in Blair, but when I was there for 5 years, we quickly realized, we started off with the university, and I had a colleague that was an adjunct professor at the university, so we were going after engineers because that was our primary concern, especially as we were starting the plant. As we progressed through the plant, though, we realized that the workforce that we needed on the floor, our chemical operators, the people that were going to run the plant, that's where we were short. So then we started going into the high schools and we started saying, we need to talk to juniors and seniors. And again, this is going back 5, 6, 7, 8 years. We need to talk to juniors and seniors, tell them the opportunities that are there. Then we shifted and said, no, no, no. We need to go and talk to junior high parents and tell them what opportunities are out there. If, obviously, if you want to go to school and get a 2-year degree, 4-year degree, there are jobs for that, but there are also jobs, just like I tried to pitch a little bit ago, that are straight out of high school, and there's options that are out there. They're good paying jobs, they're benefit jobs, but you're right, we have to get that message out there, and that's what we tried to do. We tried to do it in Blair. We came to the schools. As I worked part of, on the board with Bio Nebraska, it was going to some of the smaller colleges, the community colleges, and so on and so forth, but that's really important, that.
I think the major success for people-wise, if we start engaging the education system and getting the kids interested in staying in Nebraska, that's a crucial piece.
Yep.
Then they'll stay, they'll go to college, they may go to college somewhere else, but they'll come back home.
Yeah, it's a fair statement, and from a Fiserv perspective, as I look across my workforce, right, my Gen Xers are getting ready to retire, my baby boomers are retiring. We took a strategic look over the last 18 months, and that's why we've started Fiserv Fin Future Techies, a mouthful, but focused at the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade level in the elementary schools to bring them in to look at STEM technology, to get them excited. Their parents are a part of that program as well. We're small, but we will grow that program as we continue. We're also looking at changing up our job requirements and doing away with the necessity for bachelor's degrees to do our jobs. We're going to spend more time in the community college systems recruiting folks to come into the organization as well and really growing our folks. But you're right, we've got to start earlier, getting to the students and getting to the parents as well.
I would add from the economic development perspective that if you're in an area where they are not actively working with all of the interested parties, the educational systems, whether it is the local high schools or your community college systems, your university systems, get them to start working on this. At Gage, we actually host what we call Manufacturing Day and Industry Tour Day. We bring hundreds of students to the companies and walk them through the plants physically because they have no idea what they look like. And when you send, you guys into a school and tell them, that doesn't click any dots for them. So we pull them out, put them in these plants and show them around. And we do that twice a year because it takes, what do they say? It's 21 times to create a habit. So you have to do it continually. So we're not only doing that, and we are exposing junior high and high school students on a regular basis to these types of jobs, but we are also then putting the businesses in the school and engaging the students in a couple different capacities. Then we are also bringing in our training partners. For us, it's Southeast Community College, and we are working to create more pathways to get high school students into these jobs, whether it's job shadowing, internship programs, those types of things. I went to the employers and surveyed them in Gage County and said, tell me if you're willing to have a 16, 17, or 18-year-old follow you around for an hour a day for 20 hours over the course of a semester just to see what you do. And I was astonished at how many said they were even willing to pay them to just follow them around. Because that's kind of is essentially what we have to do to show these kids what opportunities are there because they don't know. So I encourage you to engage your workforce development office or your local economic development office because I guarantee you they're trying something. They just need help getting the word out.
Yep. And I'll add to that from a state perspective, we're taking that pretty seriously as well. The unicameral made a significant investment into Nebraska. So that's up to a $25 million investment. Our partners at the Exarban Foundation are rolling, and that's going well. I want to give a shout out to Commissioner Albin with the Department of Labor. We're talking about a partnership to do an experiment with high school apprenticeships. So they get a really direct connection to these highly skilled, highly paid jobs. So we're going to experiment in one place. If that goes well, we're going to be excited about growing it. DED is also doing an experiment with Beyond School Bells for an after-school STEM internship pathway in western Nebraska. We're serious about doing exactly what you're talking about doing. Our Nebraska kids have to know the opportunities that are in front of them. I will again challenge people in the room that shouldn't just be institutions doing it. Every one of you could play a role in that as well. In Columbus over the last year, we've had a group of students come together, and one of the things that we did was just made some phone calls, and so got them a summer internship in their chosen career path as a high school junior or senior. So they now know that the job that they're thinking about is available in Nebraska. It's available right there. So Carly Gadecki, who's here today, spent her summer interning with a local attorney. She is building a 501c3 nonprofit corporation for that group of students. I mean, the odds go way up that she's staying in Columbus or in Nebraska as a result of that. So every one of you certainly have the opportunity to do just that. Another question?
So I'm from western Nebraska. I'm from the North Platte area. And between the last census and this census, a lot of towns have lost people. You know, my dad runs a small business. He's looking for people. The government out there is looking for people to do jobs. And so with a lot of consolidation of all these companies looking for eastern Nebraska is their, you know, primary location, how do you expect that wave of economic development from eastern Nebraska to be able to impact western Nebraska when a lot of these towns are losing their youth to, you know, the university system in the bigger cities? Like, my friends went to Kearney, they stayed in Kearney for a long time. My friends went to Lincoln, they stayed in Lincoln. They went to Omaha, they stayed in Omaha. You know, so the good paying jobs are back east. You know, there's a lot more opportunities back east. So how do you plan on creating a wave to come out west as well?
Well, certainly a valid question. I would challenge a couple of those assumptions maybe. I think by its nature, the bioeconomy is going to be spread across the state because the feedstock is spread across the state. Now, we had folks from who are working in Blair here, but certainly that's not the only place. The announcement yesterday is in Phelps County. So I don't think there's any question that we will see opportunities in the bioeconomy all across the state of Nebraska. The other piece that's important, again, I hope you're hearing the theme here, that we all have a responsibility here. You're right about some small towns, but there's also small towns that are absolutely rocking and rolling and growing and keeping their young people and building new businesses. We see both. And what's the difference between those? In every case, local leadership. If we have local leaders that say, now the future I want for my hometown is this, it's where they're headed. And the opportunity is there. If that's not the vision, then that's not what we see. But the opportunities will be statewide. I believe that very firmly, and we are certainly engaging across the state to execute on those. Rich, last question probably.
You bet. First of all, thank you for convening everybody here and having this conversation. I want to go back to engaging future workforce and engaging with them at a very young age. When I was working with Prosper Lincoln, we had a program called Future Builders, and it was utilizing the Gallup Builder BP10 Builder Profile, so kids could identify where their strengths were and where they could potentially connect their strengths and passions with potential building something, whether it's business, better life, et cetera, et cetera. We took 6,000 kids through that in Lincoln and worked with Lincoln Public Schools, all the parochials, even homeschool kids, so they could do this. Then we held events that opened the eyes, not just to the kids, but to the parents as well. And I would encourage anybody in this room that wants to engage with a future workforce to do something like that. My name is Rich Clausen. I'm with Olson. I'm not doing Prosper Lincoln, but I would be happy to share with you what that success was and how those kids engaged and stayed in Nebraska. And we even got the University of Nebraska engaged as well. You can do it in Kearney. You can do it with your community college. We did it in South Sioux City as well. So anyway, be happy to help you.
I'm going to share one quick story as well, since Rich spoke up. Again, something that we can all do. So I was contacted by the father of one of last year's perfect ACT kids in Nebraska. He said, my son would love to find an internship in Nebraska this summer. He can't. He's going to have to go to Silicon Valley for an internship. So Rich and I talked, Rich took care of it, found him an internship in Nebraska. We just raised the odds that that student stays here long term. So Rich made a difference just personally in addition to the program he just talked about. Those are the things we can all do. We are out of time. I apologize for that. If you have questions, please do not leave without asking those questions to whomever you want to ask. Catch Dave, catch Joe, catch Cobus if you want to have a voice in what incentive and recruitment policy looks like for the state. You have a 15-minute break. Next session at quarter